the Fair Credit Reporting Bill. I will not be long in my few comments. Of course, when you look at this bill and you think, sir, of the issue of credit, we often, sir, find ourselves contemplating debt as well. The availability of credit, sir, is something I believe is important to many of us. And I believe all of us accept that credit in itself is something that is extremely important. Of course, sir, if we were required to function on a cash-only basis, there would be a number of things that many of us could not afford. I certainly, sir, would not be able to find hundreds of thousands of dollars to purchase a house, hundreds of thousands of dollars, sir, to purchase land and to purchase a car. And I would not have, sir, that ready availability of that kind of cash. So that credit and the proper use of credit is there to assist us in both our personal lives as well as our business lives. Of course, sir, when you do participate in obtaining credit, whether that credit is facilitated by way of credit cards or by way of a loan, what happens is that you are also required then to service debt. And we would have heard in this chamber comments made in relation to persons who seek loans. In fact, I believe the comment was that in some instances, those who seek loans the most are those who at times are not as willing to repay. And I start, sir, by first referencing the importance of credit, really to speak to two critical issues as it relates to debt. I think, sir, that it is extremely important, particularly at a time when we are going through this COVID-19 crisis, that we are extremely cautious as to how we spend our monies. And we spend a lot of time, sir, speaking about the financial institutions, the manner in which the financial institutions function. But I do not believe that we spend enough time focusing on educating consumers as to how they should function in a credit environment. And therefore, as we speak about credit, I just want, sir, to give some words of caution. First of all, in relation to consumption, I believe that Senator Drakes made specific reference to conspicuous consumption. And of course, that is very often reflected in economic terminology, and essentially what it means is that persons are lavishly consuming of goods, principally and services that they don't necessarily need. Mm-hmm. And I want, sir, to give a caution in this debate that as we seek to utilize credit that is available, that we look at what we utilize that credit for. I am concerned, sir, that there are a number of financial entities. I call them financial entities. They're not the traditional banks or the credit unions that offer readily available cash. You can go and you can get a 5,000 or 10,000 with very little credit history. But the interest rate that you have to repay, the interest rate, sir, is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And I do support what Senator Drakes would have communicated in relation to ensuring that we are better able to educate consumers with respect to that aspect, because I think that that is extremely important. Of course, sir, I do think too that it's important for us to educate broadly on how the economy works, broadly on the importance of individuals being productive. I would have heard, sir, during the period when we had national lockdowns, persons saying just close the country, just shut down the borders, without the understanding and the recognition that we need to earn foreign currency in order to be able to purchase goods and services. So it is important for persons, when being provided with opportunities for accessing credit, to ensure, sir, that the consumption that is utilized is not in a manner for any goods and services that are not necessary. I therefore, sir, on a second point, want to encourage persons to look in a more serious way in utilizing credit facilities for production, for expansion in terms of business, for taking the opportunities that are available for them to be able to better produce. I would have heard, sir, last week, I believe, in another debate, I heard my good friend Senator Drakes speaking to GDP. My very, very good friend. I saw her, when I said my good friend, I saw her, so I must say my very, very good friend, Senator Drakes, speaking to the elements of the gross domestic product. C plus I plus G plus the net of X minus M minus T, equaling the gross domestic product. And that, sir, is important, and that is good. But we have to be able to better translate that into an appreciation and an understanding by the ordinary man and woman as to what their own actions within the society and within the economic sphere is able to do with respect to building the gross domestic product. So that my voice, sir, is today encouraging persons who have access to credit to be able to use that credit in a productive manner for the expansion of business and to utilize, sir, business opportunities. Sir, as I speak to that, we do pay quite a bit of attention to the growth of debt. And very often we hear reference being made to the debt to GDP ratio and the absolute amount of the debt. I don't believe, sir, that we pay enough attention to the growth production capacity. That is an area, Mr. President, I believe. And if I get to speak a little later, sir, I will speak broadly to the issue of debt and the fact that it isn't simply about debt. It is the ability to repay the debt, but also the ability to use that debt in a the monies available in a productive manner to be better able to grow the economy. Sir, reference was made to the small businesses and individuals who right now are not meaningfully participating in the system. The truth is, sir, that there are a number of small operators, vendors, small businesses that, in a sense, sir, as small players are forced to take what the financial institutions are offering. I am of the view that we do have to ensure that there's some measure of protection for such individuals. I remember, sir, when I was at university, I did a course, Money, Banking, and the Canadian Financial System. I studied in Canada, sir. And I did a paper on bank charges and service fees. within commercial banks. And at the time, one of the things that I recognize is that there was no real relationship between those charges and those fees and the cost of providing these services. And essentially what was happening is that those charges and fees were really assisting with respect to the bottom line as opposed to anything else. And it is an area, sir, that I continue to be concerned about as I look at the different charges that I see occurring in Barbados. I've said in this chairman before, you receive a check and you go to certain financial institutions and there is a charge to change that check, which is, in my view, sir, ridiculous. Because it is, the money is there, it is the people's money that is being utilized. I just do not understand. We have a situation, sir, where you can take a check drawn on one bank, you can take it to another bank to be deposited, and they tell you that you have to wait, it's 4 working days. 4 working days. In some institutions, in fact, I know in one institution it's 8 working days. And the folly of it, Mr. President, is that there are clearings that take place at the banks every single day. There are cash clearings that take place every single day where the banks relate to each other with respect to the different checks that they have. I can say that, sir, with certainty, because I worked in a commercial bank. And I know what would have taken place in that bank. And I have no reason to believe that things are not as they were before with respect to that, or even better. Because, sir, with the utilization of technology, it is now a lot easier to be able to facilitate those things. So I believe it is important as we look at credit that we do have to look at these areas relating to the service charges and the fees, and to make sure that persons are not taken advantage of, particularly, sir, the small businessman and the small operator. The truth is this, and we know it. When you are a big operator, you can make certain demands that a smaller fella cannot make. And we have a responsibility, sir, to look after the smaller operators. Sir, in closing, I just want to state that I'm very happy with this bill. I'm very happy with the provisions that are made with respect to the sensitive information, with respect to the breaches and the penalties. Of course, there are some who believe that the penalties should be a lot higher, but I also believe that the bill speaks adequately to the rights of access and of information. And I think that that is important. And of course, the bill does make reference to the Data Protection Act 2019, and what is, if there's anything not covered here, it is reflected there. Sir, in the spirit of Christmas, I want, sir, to issue a caution. Do not, and this is for beyond this chamber, do not this Christmas season use next year's money to purchase this year's gifts or to purchase this year's goods. And I say that simply for this reason, because you know at Christmas you do get good opportunities for hire purchase and credit. I think it is important for us to make every effort to ensure that we are living within our means and that we are not, we do not find ourselves susceptible to the marketing ingenuity of those who have the ability to sway us to sometimes use credit that we do not necessarily need. With these few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Grant. Senator McConney.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to speak on this Fair Credit Reporting Bill. Sir, as I stand to support this bill which seeks to govern and regulate how we collect, how we process, how we use, and how we share data as it relates to the management of credit. I am reminded that we are now in more formalized systems, being used more and more for the purposes of dealing with credit. I recall as a child we used to call certain types of credit trussing, where you would truss a sweet bread, or you would truss some milk, or you would truss from the shopkeeper, or if you were school children, you would truss a fizzy or a strong man from the lady who was selling on the school premises. And I remember there was a time when we didn't necessarily not all of us, go to the banks to repair our houses. You got your paycheck one day and you bought 2 blocks, and then you borrowed some money from your sister or your brother or friend, and we had our own fair credit reporting system, sir. It was quite informal. But you knew that if you went to the lady in the schoolyard and trust things, and by the end of the school term, when the school term finished, you had not paid back Hilda or whomever it was their money, you understood that your credit rating and your credit score had dropped, and next term you will have a difficulty in getting sugar cakes and fizzies and strongman and chewing gums. Equally so, sir, we had where word of mouth in the neighborhood would spread. If you had borrowed money from a neighbor or a friend or a family member and you had not paid it back on time. And there were consequences to our behaviors at that time, whether we were good in repaying our credit or bad. And sir, this system of things was informal. But really and truly, what we're talking about here, collecting information and being able to use that information to make certain decisions, sir, that is not new. But what is new perhaps is I shouldn't say new, but what has really got some persons concerned, and legitimately so, are some of those concerns that were raised by other members of this honorable house today, speaking about the abuse of power, how we use, and that power as it relates to the data, how we collect the data, what data we actually collect in the first place, and then how we use that to make decisions about persons' ability to facility for them to be able to get credit. And sir, it is with that I really want to speak to some of the concerns about data. As my ministry, the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, and my other life, has responsibility for the administration of the Data Protection Act 2019, which has been proclaimed. And I want to update that we now have the Data Protection Commissioner hired and has been on board now for several months. We now have the regulations for the rest of the Data Protection Act, which has received the agreement of cabinet for it to go to the government's lawyers to finalize the regulations. And so we anticipate that within a matter of months, the parts, and I believe there were 5 or 6 different parts of that act that were not proclaimed because it was waiting on regulations, that wait should not be much longer. And I do know that members of the public, as well as some honorable members in this house, have in fact been calling on our Data Protection Commissioner to provide guidance as they seek to make sure that their companies are complying with this. And so, sir, I want to talk about data protection in a very real and living way in which we are having it today. Sir, when it comes to our credit report, one of the concerns raised was about the abuse of power and people, not people, I would say, those persons who are controlling your data and processing your data, doing so in a manner that can do you some harm. And this particular bill, Mr. President, seeks to ensure that any credit report that is shared on you, who is called a data subject in this particular bill, that it must be, clause 27, that it must be clear, it must be fair, and it must not be misleading. and that data, that credit information must be accurate and up to date. And so that puts some regulations on those who are going to collect and process your data and eventually share it, to make sure that it fits these criteria of clause 27. And should they not do so, sir? You, as the data subject, sir, would have the right to access what information they have on you. You have the right to access and ask and get answers for the purposes for which they are going to process or use your information. And you have the right to know, sir, to whom will they be sharing? With whom will they be sharing this information? Who are the recipients or the class of recipients who will be sharing this information? Sir, and should there be some kind of concern or dispute you have and it is not resolved to your satisfaction, you should also be able, sir, to submit a letter of dispute. And the credit bureau has to respond to you in a reasonable amount of time. This particular bill says within 7 days. And there is an appeal in the event that you do not get the satisfaction you need. And sir, in speaking about how decisions are made based on the data or information that is provided, where there is an adverse action or you are denied credit, or there is a change in the terms and conditions of credit you already have because of that report, sir, again, you have the right to know from them, and they must provide you with what was the decision they made and the reasons for so doing. And therefore, they cannot simply say you didn't get it. They also have an obligation, sir, to provide you with why that is so. You would have heard another colleague mention, and it is indeed so. Not only are you entitled to see what information providers and credit bureaus have in relation to you as a subject, sir, you are entitled to receive a credit report of yourself. And at least one of those reports a year must be free. You can also demand, sir, that inaccurate information, once you receive what information they have on you, you realize, wait, some of this is not right, some of this is inaccurate. You do, sir, have the right to ask for it to be corrected. And sir, you also may request that the credit bureau stop processing your information on the grounds that what they are processing, if it is inaccurate or in some way not up to date, that it will continue to cause you harm or damage. Now, of course, they may or they may not choose to comply when you make that request. The central bank will, of course, be the bureau, that the arbiter in a situation like that. And should that further not be properly dealt with, what is said is that clause 44, that where this act is deficient in any respect for the protection of your personal data, the Data Protection Act 2019 shall apply to remedy any deficiency. And sir, it is important that the people of Barbados understand what their rights are and understand that they own their data in this new dispensation of things. And therefore, as much as they may be obligated to provide that data in order to get certain services from certain institutions, they also have, along with those obligations, they also have certain rights to get information from those entities and to understand how they're being processed. Sir, consent is something that I want this honorable chamber and the people of Barbados to understand as it relates to this credit report. And one of the important things we have to understand is consent has to be given up front. It is not an afterthought. And so at the time when you're making your application for whatever credit facility you are seeking to access, that has to be shared with you up front. And indeed, it has to be done in certain specific ways, including in writing. And sir, when it looks that your information, your data or information cannot just be provided to other entities for any purpose that they ask for. According, sir, to clause 22 of this bill, there are certain, it is called permissible purposes. So these are the purposes for which the credit union, the credit bureau may provide information on your credit. One, if you are an applicant for credit. Two, if you are making an offer to act as a guarantor for someone else who has credit, who's seeking to get credit. If there is a purchase or collection of a debt, then you have to, you're obligated, I shouldn't say those are permissible purposes for which your credit information can be shared. If you are renting a house and it is time for the renewal of that tenancy, a credit report can be provided on you following the guidelines of this act. Also, an insurance company may request some information for underwriting of a particular risk. Also, there are some persons who apply for positions where they will have huge financial responsibility. So as a pre-employment check, a credit report could very well be requested from your potential employer. And of course, the company may need to do periodic monitoring of the risks, etc., looking at their portfolio. And those are the permissible purposes for which the credit bureau can provide your information. And sir, I took particular time to explain that because again, I want the public and this honorable chamber to understand that people can't just take it up and use it for any purpose whatsoever. There must be those permissible purposes for which the credit bureau is sharing your information. Now, I spoke earlier about the obligation of those entities, they call them persons, whether they're business persons or individual persons. In this case, they will have to be those licensed and registered, who can get access and what their responsibility is to provide you. Again, sir, if we look at Section 19, we're switching to the Data Protection Act at this point in time, sir. Section 19 says where personal data related to you is collected from you directly, because of course others can provide information on your behalf, but where it's collected from you, the data controller, that entity controlling your data, shall, not may, they shall at the time when your personal data is obtained provide you with the following. And sir, this list is important. The identity and contact details of the data controller within that entity. Because every entity that is going to collect your data to process it must register a data controller and a data privacy officer. That register of data controllers will be with the commissioner, the data protection commissioner, but every company has that obligation, according to Section 19 of the Data Protection, to provide you with the identity and contact details of the data controller with the contact details of their data privacy officer. In the event you have to appeal to someone, in the event you need to write someone, contact someone, who is that within this company. It cannot be a secret. It cannot be something that you, as the person who has provided your data, now have to go and scrounge around and dig around and look around for. That information ought to be provided to you early up. They shall provide you with the purposes of the processing for which your data is intended. Now, we assume that intentions are good, but let us not assume, let us then get clarity at that point. And Section 19 says that they shall provide that information for the purposes of processing. And where the processing is to be done. Will it be done in Barbados or will it be done somewhere else? That is also one bit of information, as well as I said earlier, the recipients. And finally, where they intend to transfer your information to some other entity, whether in another country or into an international organization or some other place, they must be able to inform you of that and ensure that appropriate safeguards are in place where that other entity is concerned, so that they know that they are providing a transfer that looks to your safety. Sir, I will not now go over many of the rights of data subjects or that we have as owners of our data under the Data Protection Act. I know we have had extensive discussion on this previously, but there are certain rights that are enshrined and so noted within the Data Protection Act that we ought to be aware of. There are, however, certain principles, sir, that I want to take the time to outline again for those of us who now own our data and have the certain rights, responsibility, and who need to understand the principles under which the Data Protection Act was set. One, principles relating to the processing of your personal data shall be that the processing of your personal data shall first be processed lawfully, fairly, and in a transparent manner. So transparency is also a significant principle under which the examination of how those who collect and process your information is conducting their business. Your information must be adequate, relevant, and limited to what is necessary. I heard some discussion that they can pick up any amount of information on you and ask you anything they want. According to the Data Protection Act, they should only be requesting information from you that is relevant and necessary to carry out the purposes that are stated. So extraneous information, really just for the sake of them collecting it, that is something that we, as owners of our data, need to be mindful of. I said earlier, and I repeat, that your data, they must also ensure that your data is accurate and kept up to date, and that it is kept in a form which permits identification of you for no longer than is necessary. And you would have heard, and certainly this bill requires, that after you have settled your credit, you went out and you got your loan, and the loan was settled on December 31st of 2021, well, I shouldn't say that. Let's say of 2022 by the time this act comes into to effect. 7 years after is the period for which those who have collected your information at the Credit Bureau may indeed disclose your information and keep it in a form that identifies you. So once you have settled your credit, they have up to 7 years that they may keep that information, and then they must dispose of it in a manner that does you no harm. Sir, it is important to ensure that there is provision as well, that should there be some damage or loss because your information was not, your data or information was not handled appropriately, that you can take action, including civil action, to recover whatever damages. And of course, the laws and the courts will determine to what extent that would be important. So, sir, I believe that a number of other members of this honorable house shared their perspectives, which were accurate as it relates to how we seek to protect your data. And I trust, sir, that in this very short presentation, I have been able to share with this honorable chamber and to give some comfort to those who own their data, to know what some of their rights are, to know what they should have the ability to ask for, to know what the obligations of those who have their information and will process or share their information, what those obligations are, and that we as a country and as a people will ensure that our rights are indeed respected as much as we ensure that our obligations to the institutions that lend us credit are met by us when we set into contract. And it is with these few words, Mr. President, that I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator McConney. Senator Nurse.
Thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to participate in this particular debate. I think we have had some contributions which really captured a lot of the concerns which people may have had or people do still have regarding this piece of legislation. We recognize that this is legislation which is good for, or which is useful, not only for those who are seeking credit, but probably equally more so for those who would be there to give credit. You know, the financial institutions, a large part of their credit, their risk management relies on information coming from credit bureaus. And in Barbados in particular, if we think about it, our banking system is controlled by the Canadians and the Trinidadians. And the truth is that these banks in Barbados are no more than, to a large extent, branches. But the decisions are now made out of, to a large extent, out of Barbados. And those banks, those overseas banks, heavily rely on information, such credit information, when they are looking to approve a particular loan or to give credit, and when they look at and when they're going to assess the risk of any particular transactions. So it is good for them. It really improves, it will help to improve their decision-making process. They also use it for things, it will be useful in terms even of when they have to look at things like loan loss provisions in their finances. So this is useful for those persons who will be extending credit. So what about those who will be looking or seeking to obtain credit from those types of institutions? And this is perhaps where I just wanted to, I looked at the bill, and I was more concerned, therefore, in ensuring that those people who will be approaching the financial institutions are really not taken advantage of, and that this bill really provides the level of protection that will be necessary to protect such individuals. And we've heard mention earlier of even, we're talking now about how opening up this whole credit, these credit reports, and so will be useful for those vendors and small businesses and those who will want to be able to access at some time credit facilities. So I asked myself then, if this legislation is going to be as useful as we hope it will be, then we need to be able to ensure that there are provisions to protect those who will not have the resources of the big financial institutions to be able to look after themselves. You know, the banks have their big legal departments, their big credit departments, and their marketing departments, and so on. So they have their resources. And I think that having looked at it, I am in my own mind satisfied that there is the level of protection which would be necessary largely for those particularly small entrepreneurs, individuals who would want to access credit. So I asked then, the right, do these individuals have the right to know what is in their credit file? Does the legislation ensure that they will have the right to request their credit score? Does the legislation have the right to know, help to know why a creditor may have denied credit to an applicant? Should the applicant be advised why credit was denied? Is there a remedy, for example, if there's incorrect information sitting on the credit agency's files about an individual, which ultimately may cause them not to be able to obtain credit? And if all of these things then are enshrined in this legislation, and I think I see all of what I've spoken about in here to protect the individuals, then I say, yes, the legislation is going to be useful. And moreover, I can see that over time, as some others have already mentioned, it would be quite useful in helping small business people to grow. And you know, we know that young people, particularly these days, are interested in going off and going on their own. They're not like us old folk who were contented to come up in the civil service or to sit in a job for an entire lifetime. You know, they take whatever opportunities they see and they move with it. But of course, as they develop their little businesses and so on, they will need to be able to have access to credit facilities. And I think in that regard, I can see how this will be useful to such individuals. But, Mr. President, I just want to caution, because I just want to sound a note of caution, and to just home in on this particular area for a minute, because while I see how this information can be useful for such people. What worries me is what can happen if you don't manage that credit property, which may be extended to you, because you may be able to get a credit score, but very quickly, if you do not manage that credit, that loan, whatever it may be that has been extended to you, then very quickly that score or that rating can drop. And so my advice to Barbadians generally is to be careful about using, and I pick just one, credit cards. It seems to me that this is the mode of operation now for nearly all people. Everybody uses a credit card. You go to the supermarket, you go into the store, you go wherever, and people are using credit cards. And what worries me is that very quickly they reach the maximum limits. As they say, they max out the card. And then they find themselves in a situation where they can't settle, they can't repay the debt. They can only, and what happens is that these people end up paying what is demanded on a monthly basis as the minimum payment. What happens, of course, as we very well know, is that the interest charges are 18%, 20%, 23% are building up on these balances, because if you're only paying the minimum requirement. And so you can if you're not very careful, you can very quickly be in a situation where you can never get out of debt. In fact, some of the credit gurus who have looked at this situation have suggested, look, if you are at the maximum of your credit limit and then you're paying 18 or 20% or whatever the interest may be on that credit balance, and you are only paying the minimum amount, it will take you, it is estimated it could take you up to 30 years to be able to pay off such a balance. So this use of credit also comes with a huge responsibility for those who wish to access credit. The other thing is that you also have to be mindful of is that you don't keep, again, as I mentioned, you don't keep that credit balance at a high level all of the time, because it is an indication to the banks and the other financial institutions that you are not managing, your credit situation very well. And what can happen in the long run is that you then could be denied further credit, or you may find yourself having to pay a higher interest rate, or they may your limit may actually be reduced. So coming out of this whole credit system, the financial institutions will be able to amass a whole heap of statistical information which they can use to their advantage, and in the sense that they can then use it to better manage their risks to the detriment of others. And I almost every month, Mr. President, I get solicitations from some banking institutions come in and get another credit card, we have you pre-approved, and that we are going to increase your credit limit. And, it's and especially at times like this, this time of the year, when we want to be able to participate in all the merriment and the enjoyment and the happiness and so on of the season, we can easily be easily be distracted into taking up these offers. And so I say that to make us understand that it is a serious area in which we are entering. And while I think that if you manage your debt properly, manage your debts properly, it can be useful. One of the things I would obviously like to be able to suggest is that if you can pay off your credit balance on a monthly basis, then you have the opportunity where you actually save the interest. So, there are options, there are things you can do to make sure you manage that. Why I'm raising all of this because I think it is important that a proper education program be in place to help those who are not in a position, who are not that financially savvy, to be able to understand how they need to manage their credit situation. And I think that we need to educate people. I have been in situations where I've advised friends, family, clients. One of the things about a credit card I've advised is, look, if you can pay it off and cut up the credit card and just try some other means of doing the finance. But of course, we do recognize that in this environment, it seems to me almost now impossible to be able to live without those credit cards or those lines of credit or those various facilities that have now available to us. And so, what are some of the things that I hope and I believe I heard Senator Holder mention earlier? One of the things that I am also hoping for is that credit bureaus should be restricted in the period in which they can report negative credit information about customers. Senator Holder suggested a 7-year period. I also would like to think, and I think we may have been advised, and I don't recall seeing it, but it seems, I see Senator McConney suggesting that it is actually in the bill, that there is some level of protection. But that is important. That is important. And I think, truly our circumstances 7 years ago may not be what they are now. And we do have legislation also, Mr. President, where, for example, minor criminal offenses are, can be erased from someone who had some infraction with the law 10 years ago. And so, to my mind, why not have a similar thing for making sure that that these credit bureaus and credit agencies are not allowed to carry that kind of information over a long period of time. So I'm glad to hear that that is also in the bill. One other thing I want to just speak on, it's not, it is in the area of credit, but it is more about debt collecting agencies. Because I think, too, the time has come for some greater level of regulation of those debt collecting agencies. I've heard horror stories, Mr. President, from time to time about how persons are harassed by, debt collectors and so on. And it is really, I think that the time has come to that they have to be able, or they should be required to operate in a much more professional manner. Persons should be given some notice, for example, I think, before someone turns up and decides whether you're going to repossess my vehicle or whatever. Persons should be given notice if, in my view, someone is going to refer a customer to a debt collecting agency, they should be advised of that up front. And so there are other things that worry me about that whole area of debt collecting. It is not really a credit thing, but it is a result of, in many cases, having gotten oneself into a credit situation. And I would wish to see, as I said, that be also tidied up. I think that as we go on, this, as we develop this whole credit, this whole area of credit reporting, that it is going to redound to the betterment of doing business in Barbados. I think people, as they become more understanding and more educated about how debts, how it operates in the other parts of the world, that people will recognize the importance of being committed, of sticking to the commitments on which they have signed on, and of ensuring that they maintain proper and decent credit scores. I would like to wish that this bill will set the framework, and I think it does, for which all of those improvements of which I've spoken and other people have spoken will come to fruition in the future. And so with those few words, Mr. President, I am obliged.
Thank you very much, Senator Nurse. Senator Franklin.
Mr. President, thank you very much, sir. I shan't be long. And I'm very serious about that. Senator Hall and I seem to have the same notes, so I'm not going to go over what she said, other than to say ditto. But there are a few things that concern me that I must speak about. It would be remiss of me if I didn't mention them. Sir, we have a system in Barbados where loans officers are driving, and the banks, credit unions, everybody, driving people to get loans, sometimes for things that they don't need. We have Christmas loans, Easter loans, back to school loans, all kinds of loans. We have department stores now operating the loans departments. Everybody is trying to get people in trouble with loans. And then when you can't pay, you find yourself before the courts. And it has now become an industry where lawyers in Barbados, the only business they have is debt collection. We are putting people in serious trouble with these banks, credit unions, other financial institutions. You get all kinds of loans, fast, cash in slow, cash in whatever kind of cash you got. Trying to entice people who cannot afford to pay a loan. Sometimes they can't even afford to buy lunch. And they're sending them all kind of literature to ask them. They poor look at me like Senator Nurse. I get all the kind of invitations to think I can't afford them. But somehow because of them, Senator Franklin, people think I should get loans. I'll give you a story in the end when I get close about my own personal thing. But my concern, my serious concern, is about people then ending up before the courts and then have to go and get a loan to pay X because Y put me in court and all kind of stuff, you know. All kind of madness going on in this place. And look, I'm not saying that this act is not necessary, it's not even needed. We had credit bureaus and people doing credit reporting now for years. So government isn't doing anything new, probably just regulating it. But I would want to see more than just government regulating people, how you business dealing with credit, getting your credit score, that kind of stuff. I want to see government also making it more difficult for these predators to go out there and entice people to get loans and then put them in court. And business generally fighting for the courts. So once you hear the courts are involved, you can go and borrow from your aunt, grandmother, you can go and borrow from some other institution that will lend you, and then they too will put you in court down the road. But what bothers me more, sir, I have been a credit union member, executive member. I serve on all the committees in the credit unions so far. And what troubles me, sir, is that credit unions have become just as bad as these other financial institutions who lend people money. I am ashamed sometimes, sir, to think what credit unions do to their own members. And I'll give you an example. Under the Cooperative Societies Act, if a member owes you money and they're not paying, there are internal mechanisms, internal money means within the credit union industry, where you can recover that money. You file a dispute with the regulator. It used to be the Registrar of Cooperatives, and now it's the Financial Services Commission. You can file a dispute under Section 171 of the Cooperative Societies Act. That will cost the credit union $25 to collect the money that the member has for them. $25. That's the cost of the dispute. When you file a dispute, you pay $25. And then, once the Financial Service Commission either determined by their own or they give you an arbitrator or whatever, that decision can then be registered in the court as a judgment of the High Court. But it costs you $25. But instead, we have a lot of lawyers in Barbados who prey on the unfortunate people, and the credit unions, they get kickbacks too from some of these lawyers. Because loans officers send them to certain lawyers who will give them something. And you end up now, instead of paying $25 to get your matter heard before the Financial Service Commission, you end up paying 15% of the outstanding balance. So imagine you owe them $300,000. You gotta pay 15% of that, as opposed to $25. And we have lawyers in Barbados that the only work they do is collect for credit unions and banks. I won't name them, but I can. And we are seeing nothing wrong with that. And thing goes, and it goes on and on and on and on. And the unfortunate people in Barbados who are just the people to take advantage of all the time. The poor, the fellows without a voice, or the fellows that got a voice but you know what to say, or they don't know where to say it, end up getting cheated by the system. I want, and the thing is, the courts go along with it. Because if there is a mechanism where you can pay $25 and get back and get a judgment for the money that you owe to you, or you can pay 15%, and you decide to go and take the one that you got to charge 15%, you think, that is your business. You should go pay for it. You should use the cheaper avenue. You should use the cheaper one, but you are spending the members' money or the creditors' money, and saying, well, look, you have to pay for the collection costs, but you go and choose the collection cost that is more lucrative for your lawyer friends. And then you can't afford to pay the money for whatever reason, and then they put 15% on top of it. If you can't pay what you got there, no, you think you can pay the 15% plus 15%. And credit unions are supposed to be caring for people, you know. But we have, when they first joined the credit unions, we did it out of love for our fellow man. We did it because we loved doing what we did. And we worked hard without compensation. We didn't get salaries, we didn't get all that kind of things. Now a whole new type of individual has moved into the credit unions. And they see what the credit unions can do for them. And they're taking every opportunity. The credit unions are not for profit, they're for service. But credit unions want to make as much profit as possible now and treating the members very badly. I want government to do something about that. It is all good credit reporting, but you're reporting on people who you have just put in danger. You put those people in danger, and then we can get the reports on them. I want a step before this credit reporting. I want the government to tell the credit unions in particular. The other credit unions are dear to my heart, but the other financial institutions too. Let them know that they can't go out there and put these predatory practices in place, and then when they can't recover, they should suffer the consequences. In credit unions, we had a system where we dealt with character, where character was your first criteria for getting a loan. I don't know if that still exists now, because everybody send it to some credit reporting, and you got to, and if you don't have the good credit score, you don't get your loan, that kind of stuff. But Senator Adams, he made a particular point earlier when he was talking about a good loans officer saying, you know, you miss a payment because it's X, Y, and Z. He was moving on something, and they brought him to develop it. But I remember years ago, I served on the credit committee at a credit union, not the one I'm at now. And this lady, she applied for a loan. Her salary was, a mortgage loan actually, her salary was $15.80 something a month, every 2 weeks. Twice a month, sorry. And all the recommendations came up from the staff. No, she shouldn't get this loan, she shouldn't get this loan. And I went and they filed and they said, look, that lady, she spent all that $1,500 on her normal expenses. But for the last 36 months, every month for the last 36 months, of that $1,500, she saved $2,000. And I said, She's a miracle worker. Give her the loan. Somehow she had income elsewhere. She couldn't say, because, you know, we have people like Santa Springer who would help. But she never defaulted. They got to know her people going to give them loans. I just give you that story. I remember that well. Never forget it. I'm very proud of that lady. We give loans for education, we give loans for every kind of thing, and then we treat people like they're stupid. Mr. President, I am begging the government to look into this aspect of this. I can't call it anything other than nastiness being practiced against people who are unfortunate people who are forced sometimes to get loans. Because I can tell you something, from where I sit, the other hat that I wear, salaries in Barbados are coming down. And in this pandemic, they're even coming further down. You imagine government put in place minimum wage legislation where you can't get paid less. So nobody employers are doing. If you used to work 5 days, now they may give you 4 or 3. So you're still getting the same old wages, but you've got you got a higher daily rate, but only giving you 4 days or 3 days. So government, well intentioned, and the employers trick them again. They're treating people very bad. So these people got to go and get loans. And the problem is a loan chasing a loan chasing a loan chasing a loan. We need to do something about that. I know many banks. Sir, some time ago, the government gave a lot of financial institutions what they call haircut. You know, everybody call it haircut. And they lost money. Credit unions lost a lot too. Why you on credit union lost about $33 million? And then the government or the central bank or whoever allowed credit banks to make back that money. And they're charging fees on the every month you have to pay for the bank keeping your money. If you go and you want to get a statement for something, you got to pay for every conceivable thing. You go to the teller, you got to pay for it. Everything, no, the ATMs, you got to pay for them too. The banks don't let you unless you carry some money for a fee. Once you go and do anything with the bank, they have to do something about that as well. And I want you one story. You know, the banks, I support the idea, but you know, they're trying not to send out all the paper to save the trees and stuff. But they send it to a fossil like me who don't know much about the computer. Now, one bank in particular, they send me this thing. They trade with it. And some other people send me, don't they trade with them? The computer is spinning all the time. They thought that, you know, the thing was working, so I hit it again. And they paid twice. Another one give back my money. So I decided no more electronic banking for me. Let me stick to what I'm good at. And the banks refuse to send me a statement. They insist. That I said, but you ain't even going to send it paper. Send me an email, and I would going to pay. They won't do it. The banks don't want to lick boat here, treating people badly. Just know you heard I get put in court for not paying the bank. I'm paying them till they send me a statement. I don't mind what credit score because I am not a very young fellow. And nobody ain't lend me nothing anyhow. So if I got a lower credit score, it's not going to bother me. But these people, they're doing everything as they're like. They're treating people badly. Where whatever you do, the banks charge you for it. Mm-hmm. No, they want to charge me for sending me the statement. And I tell them I got it. I'm not doing that. When you send me a statement, I can pay it. You know, but to get back to the point, sir, I want government not only to provide this system for credit reporting on people, It might save some people from themselves. You know? It might save some people from themselves because sometimes you can't afford it, but you go into the organization that you want to borrow from, and you give them half the information, half your expenses, and you get a loan. And then you don't make the first payment because you couldn't afford it in the first place. So I'm not opposing this bill. It might be useful and it might help people to control themselves. I remember, look, sitting on a credit committee where people get credit cards, gave credit cards. And then every couple of months, they want to come for a loan to clear the credit card. So, and I used to say no. And because of our credit union, all three people have to vote yes. I forced them to get rid of the credit card. I said, well, if you want this loan, give me a credit card, we can cut it up. You're not going to get a credit card and a credit card from somebody else. They're too easy to get. There's no due diligence. They don't check to see if the person can really afford to pay these things back. If people knew that I can't afford it, I would have got 4 credit cards. I don't use them really, but I got 4. Yeah, everybody sent me one. And then some people sent me one and I even open them when they ready the credit card. Put them out here. You know, so sir, as I said, I'm not going to oppose this bill. All I want are the concerns that I address, especially with the institutions, for lack of a better word, cheating their members and coercing them into situations that they cannot afford. That's all I want. I don't want to stop people from getting credit. I just want to get people to get credit that's manageable. And then when they do get credit, I don't want them being unfair through the courts or anywhere else. And I can't say those few words because they weren't a few. But I much bless you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Franklin. His Honor, Senator Greenwich.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I will be brief as well. Mr. President, I want to support this Fair Credit Reporting Bill 2021. I was extremely pleased, sir, to hear Senator Drake speak. Was extremely pleased to see that she was actually leading off the debate. She's coming around slowly. And to use her direct words, sir, she says, there is merit in this legislation. I was glad to hear that. I was also very happy to hear Senator Franklin just a few moments ago say, I'm not opposing it. It will save some people from themselves. He's coming around slowly too. Mr. President, as I was reading this bill, just not even reading, browsing through the bill, yesterday at about 2:30, after having some rice and peas and some pork chops. So I read the bill, and I came to understand a few things which I didn't understand before about credit bureau. And in going through it, sir, I learned that the credit bureau is an establishment that is set up for the purpose of collecting information relating to an individual's ability to pay debts, information about the individual's past performance in paying debts, and so on. And then the credit bureau helps its clients to determine whether a person is a credit risk or not. So the Bureau collects information on the individual's character, the individual's reputation, and the individual's responsibility. And then the banks, the credit unions, the insurance companies, and the like, these become the regular clients of the credit bureau. And they use this information which they get from the bureau to determine whether a loan should be given to Mr. X or not, or Mrs. X or not. So the bureau collects information on individuals, and on request by its clients, the banks and so on, it makes this information available to them. Like Senator Holder said earlier today, I like the idea of having a couple of credit bureaus, not just a single one. I would like to see, yes, some competition, but some clean competition in that particular environment. Now, the information that is collected by the clients from the bureau, that should be treated as confidential. And I'll say just a few words about that in a few minutes. Now, the point has been made already that this legislation will save some people from themselves. And it is a fact, and all of us in here know, that there are some of us who extend ourselves financially beyond the point of no return. And Senator Springer, too, I think he made the same point. But undoubtedly, sir, there are some Barbadians who want to live up with the Joneses. I think someone even used that phrase already in here. Too many Barbadians are guilty of making that particular mistake. When Senator Drake spoke this morning, she spoke about families that just are torn apart because they cannot manage the debt that they have put themselves in. And too many of us want to possess what the other person already has. Sir, this legislation, I do believe, will prevent people from biting off more than they can chew. I think if I was hearing correctly, if Senator Drake's again, she was the person who said that we must learn to make do with what we have. So the legislation will help us to ensure that you take on a credit risk which you can handle rather than one which is out of your capability altogether. It will act as a kind of a safety net for you. I also believe, Mr. President, that banks also have to share some of the blame for making loans available to persons who cannot handle repayment. There's a friend of mine who used to be a loans officer at, I almost called the bank's name, but at a particular bank. And here she is as a loans officer. And she was given a target which she had to reach. It was, I think, a quarterly target that she had to reach. In other words, she had to do a certain number of loans, almost in similar fashion to what some minibus owners tell their drivers they have to do. You have to make a certain amount of money for me before you can make a cent for yourself. So she had her target set. And the bonus that she would get at the end of the year was based on the target that she had reached. And she admitted to me, yes, I did make some bad decisions. But she said that the bad decisions that she made in giving persons who should not have been given loans, that came back to bite the bank. Not her. It came back to bite the bank. And the bank had to then classify that as a bad debt. It was unrecoverable. So it was the bank that felt it. But I do believe, as I said, sir, that the banks also have to share some of the blame in people getting loans which they should not receive. But, Mr. President, it is not always a matter of living up with the Joneses. It is not always that the bank has made a bad decision. Sir, this is life, and things will happen. There are some people who, if they do not get credit, sir, they will never be able to own or to obtain anything. Take, for example, sir, that young lady who works at the gas station, and she needs furniture, and she gets it, and she diligently repays the credit union or the bank that she is borrowed from. She is not living up with the Joneses. And take the same lady at the gas station, sir, whose stove has broken down, and she needs a loan in order to put food on the table for her 2 children. Sir, she doesn't want to live up with the Joneses. But as I say, sir, this is life and things will happen. Sometimes, Mr. President, some people base their risk on the fact that there is a wife or there's a partner to assist. But then the relationship breaks down. That relationship breaks down. Sometimes the person borrowing was doing 2 jobs and kept abreast of the loan. But then, sir, you're doing landscaping, or you're driving a truck, or you're raising chickens on the side, or whatever you're doing, and then that second job doesn't work out, and you're left high and dry. I think it was Senator Springer who made the point this morning that the COVID pandemic has taken a heavy toll on some people who had loans. And this is nothing to do with their own mismanagement or anything of the sort. Because those persons genuinely want to make up for the shortfall, but they now can't. They can't. So it is not always about living up with the Joneses. And the other point worth mentioning, sir, is this: that there are some people who cannot manage money. I can give you a true-to-life situation. I have a relative that works for a mere $500 a week and will save $200 out of that pay packet every week. And sir, I have another relative who works for $3,500 a month and cannot save a single cent. Some people, sir, just cannot manage money. The point has been made already, and I will re-emphasize that point, so that some people in Barbados are really and truly desperate to get a loan, really and truly desperate to get a loan. I recall years ago when I started to practice law, having to defend 2 or 3 poor, helpless people against the same man, 3 of them, different cases, against the same man, who at that time we knew in the law fraternity as a loan shark. And this was a man that made loans available to poor, desperate people at very, very exorbitant interest rates. You borrowed $5,000 from him to be paid back by a certain time, and in that time, you were paying back something like $9,000. And the courts usually held that what he was doing was unlawful, since the type of interest that he was charging was illegal. I think it was against the Usury Act and then the Rate of Interest Act. But the point is that he literally fleeced a lot of innocent people. Everybody didn't take him to court. Some people got frightened and got money from here, there, and so on, and paid him at very, very high interest rates. And if, as Senator Drakes was talking about predatory lending, that was the case of predatory lending in the past, if ever there was one. Because not only this fellow, there were others too. Those fellows were like vultures out there at the time. And they met only one particular criterion. And that criterion was that they had money which some desperate person didn't have. That was the only criterion that they met. They did not have to have a license to do anything. But under this particular piece of legislation that we've brought today, I think it is Section 3 or Section 4 of this act that says that you cannot operate a credit bureau unless you obtain a license from the central bank. So you must meet certain criteria to obtain a license. So there's far more oversight, Mr. President, where this particular piece of legislation is concerned. The key point, sir, is that we, as a jurisdiction, we must regulate how the credit bureau operates, and more importantly, what measures the credit union must take to ensure that it does not disadvantage those persons whose information it has collected. The legislation aims to ensure that the borrowing and the lending of money is done in a safer and a much fairer environment. Indeed, sir, the objects and reasons for the bill, that says it all. At the very front of the objects and reasons, it says that it is a bill that provides for the creation of a regulatory environment to promote the development of a fair credit reporting system in Barbados. Very good objective. The regulation and the use of such data, good objective. To secure the secure keeping of the private data of persons collected by credit bureau, another good objective. So there is no doubt in my mind whatsoever, Mr. President, that government should be commended for this particular piece of legislation. And yet, sir, in spite of government's efforts to achieve these positive goals as set out in the objects, we can still have certain detractors to this particular bill saying that it is linked to vaccination conspiracies and all types of nonsense. No, just imagine that we can have that. No, sir? Don't go there? All right, sorry, sorry about that. Foolish man. Where confidentiality is concerned, Mr. President, the information which is shared between the bureau and the bank, or the bureau and the credit union, that should be treated as inviolable. You don't violate it. It should not be tampered with, and it shouldn't be shared with any third party. Indeed, sir, I think the Act virtually emphasizes, the bill emphasizes that third parties should do their own due diligence and should not be depending on either the bank or the bureau to give any information to them. The information, sir, should not be used to disadvantage the subject in any way. All you have to do in order to grasp the point, sir, is to just think about the doctor-patient relationship, and you'll understand precisely what I mean, where it is so emphasized that a person's medical condition is personal and confidential. Now, Section 20 of the bill says that if the credit union breaches its responsibility, that the fine is $50,000. I think that both Senator Adams and Senator Holder said that they would have increased that particular penalty. I share that view too, but I can live with it for the time being. Sir, in recent years, confidentiality has come to the fore in many aspects of business in Barbados. I say, sir, that we need confidentiality and trust now more than ever. I would never forget, sir, that when I first taught at Princess Margaret School, long time ago, I remember, like, during the first year, I used to do it almost every month because I wasn't too hot either on saving and spending and managing either. Yeah, and I wasn't as bad as Senator Sprague. No. But I would take up the phone and I would call. I would take up the phone and I would call the bank myself, sir. And I would just say on the phone, my name is Rudolph Greenwich. I have an account such and such, and I would like to know what my balance is on the account. And the person would give me that information over the telephone. That was the world that we lived in at that time. But not today. Nowadays, and I've had another experience recently where you're sending money overseas, and I was asked 1 million questions on the phone before they could say yes to me. They asked me for my middle name. Mr. Greenwich, was your middle name? Mr. Greenwich, was your mother's maiden name? Mr. Greenwich, was your favorite movie? What had happened is that I had previously used this same facility, and they had some information on me. And they were matching it. But I never even remembered that I had gone through it in the first instance. And they were asking me these questions just to make sure that I was the right person. But when they asked me, sir, I was honestly at the point where I was beginning to lose my temper just a little bit with the young lady. But sir, just as I was getting annoyed, I said to myself, boy, you know, don't get vexed, because she has to do this. When you were at Princess Margaret, that was the world you live in then. But this is the world that we live in now. There are too many scammers up there, and all this lady is trying to do is to shut up the scammers from getting at you. She is trying to protect you, and you shouldn't be annoyed with her. But Mr. President, I firmly believe that to give efficacy to this legislation, that workers at the credit bureau, workers in the banks, workers in the insurance company, and so on, I believe that there should be some process where all of them are sworn to secrecy. I do believe that, sir. Sir, and I mean even down to the cleaner and the security guard, because, sir, they see and they see things and they hear things at work as well. And confidentiality is something which is so very important in these days. Of course, sir, there will be instances where the Bureau will be called upon to disclose some information on the particular subject. And I think it is Section 21 that speaks to those instances where the Bureau will definitely have to disclose the information. In response to a court order, for instance, to assist the court in any way, to assist in the investigation of insurance fraud and so on. And all of this is understandable because our national interest is above all other interests. So, Mr. President, as I said, I'm not going to be any longer. I do have one or two more notes. But, Mr. President, I have no problem whatsoever in supporting this credit reporting bill. Thank you very much.
Senator Boyce. Thank you, Senator Grizz. Senator Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. President. It was not my intention to speak on this legislation, but I was so moved by the various speeches which were made, I thought it prudent, sir, to add a short position which would, in effect, at first blush, seem to go against the grain, but I believe it prudent in a state where we encourage active citizenry that we seek to highlight other avenues and or concerns which may be counterfactual to what may seem to be the norm. And in the discourse today, sir, I think the objective of the bill is one which no one can say ought not to be done. However, where I started to get a bit of doubt and would ask that the government ensure that there's adequate rollout and notification of what is to come is when there were the various euphemisms expressing that this bill would help persons access to finance, sir, that this bill would help persons to control their spending, that this bill would provide some form of safety net. And we certainly hope that that is the case. But just a short word of caution, sir, and recommendation that this bill or this development be given a bit of a longer runway to allow persons to bring themselves up to speed with regard to the requirements. And the reason that is proffered, sir, is when we look at Section 2 or Section 3, which speaks to credit information providers, sir. And these credit information providers, we would assume, sir, this is under Section 16, sir, which provide the information to the credit bureau. And if we look at those persons who are, or entities which are identified, what this means as we go through the list, sir, is that based on information coming from these entities, you may or may not have an issue with getting your credit report cleared. And a list of the entities show the light and power, sir. So if your light bill isn't paid, there's a consequence. Water authority, sir. If your water bill isn't paid, there's a consequence. KIPO, sir. I don't know if the president is aware, sir, but the amount of persons who would have received notifications of having corporate obligations which are due. Now, all this is part of the government getting its house in order. But in getting your house in order and seeking to bring the regulations up to date and streamlining and getting the various companies brought up to speed, do citizens recognize that there will now be an obligation to ensure that these obligations are settled before they have access to financing? So it goes on, land registry. You have heard me speak, or maybe your predecessor, sir, that I believe far less from keeping up with the Joneses. The only way for Barbadians who have not come from a source of wealth to move themselves forward in a society such as ours, with 166 square kilometers, is to seek to own piece of the rock. And in seeking to own piece of the rock, sir, it has been a practice by those who know, sir, that land tax is something that you somewhat carry, sir. Now, we recognize that the government is saying, well, you have to render unto Caesar that which is his. But persons need to be aware that this is coming down the pipeline, because it seems to be from this that if the land registry indicates that you have an outstanding liability, that's going to the credit bureau. Therefore, your report will say that you have these outstanding liabilities. So in seeking to go, and it goes on, sir, the registration office, the telecommunication, if you owe money to Flo or whoever, hire purchase, if you owe money to courts. Sir, the Student Revolving Fund Act. Sir, Senator Hunter and I will share a laugh, but I learned a lesson a long time ago that sometimes friendship isn't what it seems. And you might find yourself not in a, dare I call it, a Springer situation, sir, but where you try to assist a friend and you find yourself on a hook, sir. But the point is this. The point is this, sir. We need to make sure that when this legislation is coming out, that persons have the opportunity to get their house in order. This list is one which every person in this house, sir, I dare any person to put their hand up right now and say that if they look at these entities, that all is well and good with their affairs. That's about 3. So the point is, sir, we do not want this bill. Sorry.
Senator McConnell, what do you raise?
Yes, sir, just a point of elucidation. We do agree that in section, well, clause 16.3, there is identification at 3 of a number of entities that could be designated to be those allowed to provide credit information to the credit bureau. But I think it's important too to understand that when this act comes into effect, only the financial institutions which are listed under 16.1, which is a financial institution license under the Institutions Act, an insurance company and credit union, they are the ones that are automatically captured under this. However, the central bank reserves the right at a later stage to designate. So there are those that are automatic as soon as the act comes in, and then there are those that can be designated later. And the point being made by my honorable colleague is a very good one, because if we also look, sir, at clause 16.4, it says before the central bank designates an entity as a credit information provider, the entity must have systems in place for proper data management, security and control, and adequate systems and arrangements have been put in place for the entity. So I hope he will find some assurance, sir, that we have put things in place to ensure that once there's a designated provider, that Barbados, under this law, will be seeking to make sure that what my honorable colleague is asking to happen, that indeed would be the case. Thank you, sir.
Senator McConnell. Senator Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. President. And that goes exactly to the point. We're bringing the legislation in. We're saying this is the aim. So allow me, sir, to voice the concern of those who say, well, okay, we must be wary that it may have a counterproductive effect if certain things are allowed without that runway. So I am grateful for Senator and Minister McConney for the stipulation that the central bank, before they do the notice, has to do certain checks. But then are we saying, or are we recognizing that we also need to ensure that there is adequate notice and advertisement of what is going to come down the line? So the simple point I'm saying is that in all the discussions today, we've heard a certain perspective and we agree with the intention, but the best of intentions can go awry, and we need to ensure that the public are aware. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Boyce. Senator Walcott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to, of course, thank all honorable members who spoke on both sides in support and who were fair in their comments and very necessary criticism of the bill. I just want to make reference to a matter that was raised, I believe, by two honorable senators on the other side regarding the matter of financial literacy and the bureau that was spoken about. My understanding is that the bureau has been launched since October 2020, indeed by the Minister Dwight Sutherland. And at that time, in his speech, he made it clear that the intention was to give citizens of Barbados their skills and able to navigate life activities and to understand financial matters and financial management. At that time, he indicated that they would be targeting households, community groups, startup MSCs, as well as schools. Specifically, he said that it was very important that the school children be exposed to this. And certainly, Mr. President, I believe that all members in here would say that this could only all go well, especially for small businesses and households. As I understand it, in spite of COVID, training is continuing at satellite locations across the island, and they've also been using the technology to do some of this training. We've had a full discussion, a full debate today, and I just want to simply beg that this bill be now read a second time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Walcott. The question is that this bill be read a second time. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the Honour do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do not leave the chair and the Honourable Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. Honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Right, Pedro. Pedro, you ready? You ready? Yeah. The Senate is now in committee.
Part 1, clauses 1 and 2.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 1, clauses 1 and 2 stand part.
The question is that Part 1, clauses 1 and 2 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 2, clause 3 stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clause 3 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 4 to 14.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 4 to 14 stand part.
The question is that Part 3, clauses 4 to 14 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 15 to 29.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 15 to 29 stand part.
Chairman?
Senator Franklin?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I think Senator Holder mentioned it, but there's some clarification needed here. Section 16, or clause 16 says, the following credit providers, let me just wait for me, I have it written out in my notes. It says, for the purpose of this act, the following credit information providers shall provide their subject information to a credit bureau. And then it gives the names of the financial institutions, insurance companies, and credit unions. And then Section 21 then says, a credit information provider may disclose credit information to a credit bureau, A, with the consent of a data subject. It can't be in one section where you shall do it, and then where you may do it. It got to be, I think that is something that we have to look at, right?
Chairman, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 15 to 29 stand part.
Senator Franklin's concern is noted. The question is that Part 4, clauses 15 to 29 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 30 to 34.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 5, clauses 30 to 34 stand part.
The question is that Part 5, clauses 30 to 34 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 6, clauses 35 to 47.
Chairman, I beg to move that Part 6, clauses 35 to 47 stand part.
The question is that Part 6, clauses 35 to 47 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be now read a third time. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as a Fair Credit Reporting Act 2021.
The question is that this bill be now passed and be cited as the Fair Credit Reporting Act 2021. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this sitting be now suspended for 10 minutes.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 4:50 p.m. today. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Sorry? Yeah. Oh, 4:55, sorry. My math is a little flawed this afternoon. It's early signs of hunger. Senator Frank is offering me his spectacles, but I don't want to see the world through his eyes. I couldn't help myself. That was too that was a full task. The question is that this sitting be suspended until 4:55 p.m. today. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This sitting is so suspended.